as I'm sure you know, the heart of any great story is its main characters. After all, this is the person we'll be following through trials and drama, whose victories we cheer for, and whose losses get us right in the feels. But every memorable character begins with a clear understanding of who they are at their core. Hi, it's Simkray, and welcome to Krayon Quest. Now in my last video, we discussed how to develop a concept for your webcomic as a starting point, which we can now use to generate ideas for all of our characters. But for this video, we will mainly be focusing on the main character. Side note, I will be making videos about the other types of characters, so don't worry. And at the end of my last video, I asked you guys, what's an aspect of character design or writing characters that you find difficult? And a few people did take the time to leave a comment, which I really do appreciate as a small channel. And I noticed a lot of the comments kind of echoed the same or similar things, which I will be answering throughout this video. So I'm guessing by now, you have a rough concept and an idea for your story. But where do we start when it comes to crafting a main character? Well, that's where your concept comes in. That's kind of why we talked about it in the last episode. The more specific your concept is, the easier it'll be to make everything fit in a way that feels cohesive. For example, I've mentioned in my previous video, my starting concept was virtual reality, because I wanted to set my story in a completely made up world where I had full control of essentially designing my own set of rules for it, while still having access to our real life history. And initially, I was inspired by isekai and game-based worlds like No Game No Life, although I notice a lot of isekai tend to be based around a kind of medieval Dungeons and Dragons, Knights of the Round Table kind of vibe. And because of that, they tend to share a lot of common lore, which there isn't necessarily anything wrong with that. Many great stories do piggyback off of others. It's just aesthetically, it's not the vibe I wanted. So instead, I started looking at what purpose do I want my concept to serve for my characters, and what kind of things do I want or need my characters to be able to do within my story. And at the time I was planning Not Another Cliche, I was still at university, during which my classes would randomly be cancelled last minute, and I remember just sitting on the tube on my way home, wishing I could just have this information downloaded directly into my brain so I could just skip all of this. And long story short, my own experiences and frustrations are what ended up inspiring my world and concept. So my initial virtual reality idea evolved into being a virtual art university because of those experiences I had. Or more specifically, I thought about, if I was to design my own ideal art university, how would I want that to work? And everything just kind of flowed from there. Now, the reason why I'm telling you this little story is because with that clearer purpose for my concept and my world, I could now look at designing characters. So for your story, you might want to ask yourself, what is the ideal version of your concept? Don't just take inspiration from shows or games that you like. Sometimes your own feelings on an issue or parts of your own life can be a better source of inspiration. 1. Desires and goals. The purpose of your main character is to drive the plot of the story through their goals, desires, or some kind of conflict. Now, your character's goal doesn't even have to be anything too complicated, or grand for that matter. In fact, to start, I would simplify it in a way that's easy to understand, and that will make it easier for you to work with. Some of the best stories have character goals that can be simplified, like revenge. I want to save my sister. I want to permanently delete all the titans. I want to be the king of the pirates. You get the drill. So, think about what's going to be that driving force that makes your main character do what they do, and find a way to incorporate their goal into the main plot of the story. Like for example, in Demon Slayer, the main character wants to save his sister by turning her back into a human, and because of this, he ends up having no other choice but to fight demons in hopes of one day discovering a cure. Now obviously that's me simplifying the story into its key point, but maybe your main character's desire comes from a strong emotion or past trauma. Maybe the reason why they're so selfish is because they know what it's like to lose everything, and so they find it difficult to let go and get overly protective of the few people they let in. Or maybe they're naive because they've had such a comfortable, sheltered life. Or perhaps they just want to feel like they belong, and so keep looking for something that will fill that void. Whatever the reason, being able to ground your character in motivations and emotions we all experience can help your reader get more invested in your character, while also making sure that there is always something the main character is working towards, even during slight detours in your story. Another optional thing to keep in mind is what I like to call the secondary purpose, because if, like me, you're deciding to create a whole world with its own set of rules that need to be explained to the reader, you may need a character that is unfamiliar or new to things. For me, this role is fulfilled by my main character Sky, since she's essentially a new student who doesn't know anything about the world yet. But another way people fulfill this role is by having a character with amnesia, who is trying to regain their memories, which kinda kills two birds with one stone, since most people with amnesia would probably also have the goal of regaining their memories. Although I do think the whole amnesia thing is a bit tropey and overdone, so if you're gonna do it, find a way to make it actually interesting. And the main downside is that you can't really use that character's backstory or knowledge until they remember who they are. Which leads me to 2. Developing a backstory for your character. Everyone has a past, which shapes them into the person they are currently. Your main character is no different. And if you really want your character to fit into the world you create, you should consider how their timeline fits into the world and its history, particularly if you are creating a fantasy story. Now, I'm not saying you have to have everything planned out, but having a general idea of your main character's life will help when it comes to writing your story. And it will also help if you plan on foreshadowing certain plot points. Keep in mind that the character's full timeline of events from the day that they are born to the day that they die doesn't necessarily have to be included in the story. You may only want to focus on a small section of their overall life, but you knowing about the other parts can help inform your choices for the character. Creating a timeline for your character. Typically, whenever I'm planning a character's timeline, I like to start with who I envision my character becoming by the end of the story and work backwards from there. So for example, if your main character is this overpowered monster fighter by the end, maybe they can start as a weak little noob who doesn't know how to fight. Or let's say we're writing a creepy vampire who, by the end of the story, has earned the respect and trust of almost everyone in the village. Well then, the start of the character story could simply be that no one trusts them. And figuring out how we get from point A to point B is where you as a writer get to flex a bit. Maybe the main character is misunderstood. Or perhaps they pretend to be a human to blend in, but everyone notices that bad things always seem to happen around them. Maybe they were cursed to become a vampire. Maybe they've been secretly protecting the village from much worse monsters during the night, when everyone's sleeping, and have no choice but to drink the villagers' blood to keep going. Or maybe they really are just a bad guy. In some cases, you can even plan out your main character's childhood, adolescence, young adulthood, and adulthood, as understanding them through each major stage in their life may give you something deeper to add to the story. But make sure to identify any big events or things that would have a big impact on the character, and note any important relationships and experiences. For example, were they bullied as a kid or cheated on? Maybe they won an award for something and that becomes like their whole personality. Or maybe someone important to them died. All of these kinds of things can help mold your character or even push them in certain directions. 3. Character personality. If there's one thing you take away from this video, let it be this: a flawless character is a flavorless character. And a common reply from you guys was that you find picking negative traits and traits that differ from character to character or you as the writer difficult. Story time! When I was younger, I thought that in order to make readers like my main character, they should mainly have positive traits. But in the end, all that did was make for a really boring character who never had any conflicts or real struggles. Ironically, flaws make a character seem more likable. Having your character occasionally doubt themselves or not have all the answers, or even be a little selfish from time to time where maybe they don't always do the right thing can make them feel more grounded. And allows the reader to picture themselves in those moments and think about how they would have handled those situations, or at the very least, allows people to understand your character's motivations even if it's not a choice they would have made. After all, sometimes we humans have a tendency to do things that don't always benefit us. Sometimes we say things that hurt others whether we meant it to or not. I mean, how many times have you bonded with someone over a common struggle you both share? Or after cracking jokes about a dark situation? Or when you think about some of your favorite characters from other shows, webcomics, or games, do you like them because they're perfect and always do the right thing? Or do you like them despite their flaws? Remember, your character doesn't necessarily need to have all their shit together. What matters is your ability to allow the reader to understand your character's perspective and that they are trying to attain their goals in their own way. When it comes to choosing personality traits for your characters, something I like to do is simplify my character's personality into just 3 words. And I use these 3 words as a kind of guide for how the character will react in any given situation. For example, for my main character Sky, her 3 words are logical, slow, and sarcastic. Logical because although she's in a virtual fantasy world, she's new and doesn't know the rules for it yet. So she will still approach most situations as if she were still in the real world, because she's still in that mindset. She's slow only under certain conditions. For example, when Aki introduces Sky to her friends, who all happen to hold some kind of status within the club, she doesn't really clock on to how lucky she's been until someone basically spells it out for her. And she tends to overlook or overthink basic things like reading instructions, ignoring warnings, etc, etc. But she can also be a little sarcastic when she knows she's in the right, or feels confident about something. Now these 3 words don't have to remain the same throughout your story. In fact, for your main character, they should change as your character grows and gets closer to reaching their goal. 4. Personality through action. Now this is where your writing and art come together, as you need to make sure to give your character a personality that shines through their words, mannerisms, reactions, and actions. If your main character is the cinnamon roll type that's kind to everyone, then have them actively go out of their way to do kind things for others, including strangers. When their friend is down, let them be the one to make them feel better, by being the shoulder they cry on, or by cooking their favorite food. Just something that shows that they pay attention and truly care about others. Otherwise, your reader's just not gonna buy it. If they're the bookwormy or hobby-obsessed type, perhaps they're always seeking new knowledge on topics, which sometimes leads them to do not so good stuff. But hey, at least they learned that new spell.
We almost died!
Yeah, but you didn't though. So chill. These little quirks help give a little more insight into what kind of person your character is. You can also show characterization through the way you write a character's dialogue. Maybe they have a unique way that they talk compared to the rest of the cast. For example, for one of my characters called B, she's Jamaican, and I like to have her throw in some patois from time to time, usually when she's annoyed, which is a fun little joke for my fellow Jamaicans. Or maybe you could have your character always crack jokes in an awkward situation. Perhaps they speak to everyone with a kind of sarcasm that goes over everyone's heads. Just remember to also sprinkle in some non-verbal cues with their body language, facial expressions, or even silence. For example, if your character is someone important, maybe whenever they walk into a room, everyone goes silent, observing everything they do. Or maybe your character fidgets nervously when they're lying. Does their gaze soften a little when they talk about their loved ones? These subtle details add layers without you having to do too much, like constantly going out of your way to tell the reader what kind of person your character is.
Oh my god, MC Kun is so nice. Oh my god, I want to marry him. He's so cool. Oh my god, he's so strong.
Stop. Just show people the traits. You don't have to have people constantly talking about how cool and amazing the main character is all the time. Because believe it or not, nobody actually likes being told about a character. The fun is in discovering these things as you read. So remember, show, don't tell. 5. Growth is good. One of the most satisfying things about reading a long-form webcomic is seeing the main character change and grow throughout the story. No one likes a static character. Instead, allow them to learn from their mistakes. Like I said before, your main character should be different from how they first started. Typically, most readers expect that the main character will change for the better, but that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. Sometimes a good twist can be to see the downfall of your character, like Light Yagami from Death Note. Do the 2 romantic leads end up together, married with a puppy and 15 kiddos? Does the hero stop falling for that one trick the villain always does during the fight? Does the victim finally fight back against their bully? Basically, your readers just want to see a payoff. All of them challenges and struggles need to lead to something. If your character only has struggles but no empowering or happy moments, your readers may lose interest. 6. Tailor to your target audience. The last thing you should keep in mind is who your intended target audience is. Because I know it can be tempting to just be like, well, obviously I want everyone to be able to read my webcomic, because but sometimes the problem with that is that when you're trying to appeal to everyone, you risk not appealing to anyone at all, as your story and characters can sometimes end up being a little flavorless. There's no spice. Because the thing is, not everyone necessarily likes the same things, and there will be people who just don't like certain tropes or what you make, and that's okay. Honestly, the sooner you get over the fact, the better. But that's why we have different genres and categories, to make it a little easier for the right people to find your work. And remember, some topics aren't appropriate for all ages, and similarly, some things that are appealing to little kids won't necessarily be appealing to teens or adults. So knowing your age demographic will help you craft a more age-appropriate story, and will help you further down the line when it comes to marketing. But I'll be talking more about that in a future video, hopefully. Additionally, if you ever end up deciding that you'd like to submit your story to a publisher, one of the many things they will ask you is who your target audience is. And you can't just be like, everyone, because then it's just really difficult to market your work to people. A great way to figure out who you want to target your webcomic to is by thinking about what kind of person would be interested in reading your webcomic. What niche might that person belong to? And what personal interests, hobbies, or fandoms would they have that you can maybe incorporate into your main character to draw them into your story? For example, do they like gaming or love to cook? Are they an anime manga lover or a Marvel DC fan? Knowing these kinds of things can help you understand your readers and what they might expect from your work.
7.
In conclusion, so to recap, give your main character flaws and goals, show their personality through their actions, and allow them to learn and change throughout the story. And lastly, keep your target audience in mind. Most of what I've said in this video also applies to crafting other types of characters like villains and side characters, but I will be making videos about those types of characters in separate videos. Remember, when we see ourselves reflected in a character or can understand and sympathize with their goal, that's when we become invested in the character. Anyway, my next video will be all about villains and antagonists. So, here's a question for you. What do you struggle with the most when it comes to writing a villain or antagonist? Or, what's a trope you hate when it comes to villains or antagonists? I'll be talking about your answers in the next video, so I hope you look forward to it. Okay, thanks, bye. So I realized that I did technically say in the last video that I was going to post the following month, but then a lot of things kind of happened and it was like hot as balls in the UK for some reason. I just couldn't work. Like I physically could not turn on my computer because it was just too hot. And if you know anything about the UK, we don't have AC. I have learned from my last mistake. I will not be saying when I'm going to post. I will just hopefully be able to post. I do plan on making this into a full realized series, so I'm going to be taking my time. You guys seem to be liking the series so far, and I only really posted like one video, so I shall continue for as long as people are actually interested in the series. That's it. Bye!